Welcome, welcome to whomever's arrived. We'll start in a few minutes. My name is David Dixon. I'll be your host. Okay. About to begin. Counting down. 10, 9, 8. Hello. Thanks for coming by. I wasn't really sure how to build this as a Zoom event or as an event. But in any event, it's Thursday. It's a nice day out, and we appreciate you being here to experience some fire, some flames with Leslie Brack. The artist behind Paradise and Other Fires here at Cathouse Proper in Brooklyn, which should also be noted is unceded Lenape land at 524 Court Street. And if you've ever been here, you'll know that we're on the second floor, but the entrance is on Huntington Street. So if you come, 524 is actually Buttermilk Channel, a restaurant downstairs, but our entrance is right around the corner on Huntington Street. So we're gonna have a real casual and fun conversation with Leslie Brack about the work, a walkthrough, a fireside chat, as we're calling it, in honor of FDR. And here are people wandered in off the streets. Chase Wilson and Kelly Harper. Thank you so much for being here in the flesh. So where to begin, Leslie Brack? Let's start with the title. The title of the show. Paradise and Other Fires.
That's the title. I suggested the title to you, and you said yes. And it was a very short discussion.
It was quick.
Why do you think it was such a short discussion?
It sounded just right. And Paradise is one of the cities that was decimated in California, correct?
That's right. That's right.
There's some irony there.
There's some irony there. One of the ironies in the show, I think, Paradise being the most deadliest and costliest California wildfire in history. 84 people died. So pretty much the opposite of Paradise. I think maybe a painting or two refers to that here. But I've definitely made several paintings about Paradise itself. And as far as other fires, instead of other disasters or some other title, I wanted to take a neutral tone with the idea of the fires, not necessarily devastating, horrific fires with a tremendous loss of life, but also fires from riots, fires from other events as well. So I didn't want to be one to judge in the title.
Right, so Paradise is in California, but each of the paintings, at least here in the hot room, we're calling this the hot room, which is the room with the paintings that are, with the fires that are active. In other words, they're recent historically. They happened in the last couple of years. You'll see in the entranceway that there's World War I photographs that have been reproduced in watercolor. So all the paintings are watercolor, which is also another irony, possibly, that you're painting fire with water, as Sharon Butler said on Two Coats. That was brilliant, fire with water. So do you feel like there's a significance in using fire to paint water?
That'd be even better and harder.
Oh yeah, fire.
I'll try that next. Yeah, I felt like I have more experience with oil paint, but I felt like using oil for this subject matter didn't feel right. Because oil paint is permanent, or has more permanence. It has, it's more archival. It's worth more in the market. It tends to be bigger and more spectacular than watercolor. Watercolor is also thought of as a preparatory medium, where oil paint isn't. So all of those factors were part of it. But also just on a, using the medium level, I really liked how watercolor flows. After our last collaboration together with the file cabinets, doing these geometric forms with watercolor was a nice irony. But I really wanted to, I guess, become a landscape painter the last couple of years.
Right, right.
And let the medium do some of the work, as opposed to trying to contain it.
So a dystopic landscape painter, American landscape painter. You put yourself in the 19th century tradition.
I think of myself as a 19th century landscape painter. Yes, I do.
Excellent. These are, I mean, the fire paintings, I guess they all do happen in the United States. That's true, right? That's one.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
really thought of
They're
that.
all in the U.S. I know there are devastating fires in other places too, but this is the media imagery that comes to me.
So yeah, to be specific then, each of the paintings, which are watercolor and not particularly large, but this is kind of the scale you've always worked on in a way. Even your oil paintings were generally smaller in scale.
Yeah, I do like manageable.
Manageable scale. And this one's called Malibu Traffic. Malibu Traffic Fire or Malibu Fire Traffic.
Yeah, so this is the coastal evacuation route that runs right along the ocean.
Right.
And that's everyone evacuating.
So
Presumably, or maybe it's just traffic. Or maybe it's just traffic.
One of the things that we did on the Instagram feed was put the news story with the particular image. Mm-hmm. So this one was, each was horrifying in its own way, but this one was particularly so, being caught in a traffic jam, and they had eyewitnesses or people that had been caught in those traffic jams that were sort of urged to run away and leave their cars. And one group somehow took up residence in a Pepsi truck or something to hide. And I feel like that's one of the questions for me for the show was, how relevant do you feel the news story or the event itself is to the painting? I mean, do I need to know? I mean, the title tells me this is Malibu, but do I need to know about that particular event?
I'm not sure. On some level, yes, because I like to say what the event is in the title, and I think that's more for my memory, so I don't forget these events. And I've probably made 20 of these, and they're all events I definitely would have forgotten about, and I assume other people would forget about as well. That said, no, I don't think they're that important individually. I think both. So I think people recognize what the image is. People know people are evacuating a fire when they look at that image, because we've seen these familiar photographs before, especially with everyone turning on the camera during a disaster and filming it and uploading it during the disaster. So I think we're familiar with it. You know, that this image could be Australia, that had a similar color. So I guess yes and no.
Well, that's one of the points, is that it's all sort of one fire in this room, right? I mean, it's one fire that travels. This one actually is in Rio, so we are outside of the United States.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. This is the Rio Museum Fire that happened. All of the ones in this room happened in the last 2 years, I think. So the Rio Museum, and each of which comes from some sort of either Anthropocene or urban unrest, or in this case, austerity measures. So each has there's some politics behind the fires, or the reason that fires occurred. So the Rio Museum one, which again, on the Instagram feed, I'm not trying to send everybody there, but I do think it's interesting it was fun for me, I have to say, it was fun for me to link up and search for, because Leslie didn't provide me necessarily with the news story, was to find, one, the picture online, because all of them are taken from news events or news stories, and then two, to read about each of the events, because I was basically just doing it to educate myself so I could talk to people about it. But then that's when the question as to how important that referent is. Like, say, for example, if you are a 19th century landscape painter and you paint a landscape, when I look at the painting, I don't necessarily feel the urge to go to the landscape. I mean, I don't really need to go to this place where you painted it in order to fully experience the painting. So I'm wondering, you know, the politics behind it. Again, it comes back to that. Is it one fire? And the particular politics or what distinguish it from being all one tragedy, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. These are all political fires, right?
Right.
Even especially the World War I ones included, which are in the other room, and we'll go over there. But yeah, these are all political fires.
Right.
Of course, fires happen naturally in the forest, and they always have. But I don't think like the Paradise Fire, which was a forest fire, that was blamed on PG&E, the privately owned utility. And they were in fact indicted for 84 counts of murder. So that's not a usual wildfire like the kind I grew up with. So there aren't any paintings. I haven't made a painting of a naturally occurring fire. These are all political.
Right.
From riots started by BLM protesters to the Rio piece here, which is an austerity. Everyone blames austerity on that fire. The museum had been complaining for years that if a fire happened, it would take all of Brazil's history with it, and they needed a sprinkler system, and they needed the electrical made so it wouldn't start a fire. And of course, that money wasn't presented. That said, I think when people see this particular one, Rio, they see the White House and they see it politically in a different way that I definitely wasn't intending. But that's fine. I mean, I think that's part of it. Maybe a fantasy fire. I haven't done any fantasy fires yet. Some people see this one as one.
So this, yeah. So maybe this is the most recognizable one because of the Wendy's. At least when people come in and
They remember.
they remember it was only exactly 1 year ago on June 12th, Rayshard Brooks. And in your earlier work, you often use text and image together. So this one kind of speaks to that a bit because you've got your Wendy's in there, which again, well, it's something that's always an interesting challenge with Leslie's work because there's a consistency, I always feel, and we've done 4 shows together in different places and in different environments. There's a consistency and tone to your work, which I'm always trying to put my finger on, and it's difficult. Sardonic comes up a lot, but then we looked it up and both the synonym and the antonym for sardonic seem to work. So it's sort of sad sack, you're sort of pessimistic, but passionate and caring. So these are all ways that things that come up, I think, when I try to get to the tone of your work, which, and now the big point I feel is the transition here from watercolor, which you started doing painting about 5 or 6 years ago exclusively, from the earlier oil paintings. And maybe you want to explain a little bit why you shifted to watercolor.
I think it was boredom, and I think it was frustration with oil paint, and I think it was a way to discover new subject matter and get out of habits, because I'd been painting in oil for forever, for over a decade, maybe 2. So it was a pretty organic process and not really conceptually motivated. In fact, my work only looks highly conceptually motivated when you organize it. It looks, the narrative that you put together in this room is pretty amazing. You made sense of the work.
Well, I don't know. I always felt like that sardonic irony or whatever it is that's in your work always feels, very political to me, even if it's not about a specific event like these are. I mean, there's that critique. There's a critique that runs through it of, I don't know if it's just consciousness or American culture or your own experiences. Or
right. No, you're right.
Yeah, because this was sitting in here with the work for over a month, which by the way shows open till June 27th. We extended it, but sitting in here with the work and trying to figure out what was different about the watercolor as opposed to oil paintings. What really I felt like was a transition and a change in the work was the earlier oil paintings were collage, basically. You would cut out collages from magazines and other sources, text, and then make a collage in paper, but then paint from the collage in a kind of way. Whereas when you shifted to watercolor, and the show that we did prior to this one, which was file cabinets, paintings of file cabinets, which filled the whole, say, field of vision, filled the whole page that you painted. So there was only one item, for example, in the painting, as there are here in this show too. So all your watercolors, you don't make the collage. And so my big feeling was that the medium itself, the watercolor, was that second element, because you use watercolor against type, or the way that you might expect watercolor to be used, like hard surfaces, linear surfaces in the file cabinets, and then with these water for fire in this case, and also like you're talking about landscape painting, atmospheric, sort of romantic imagery, but here we have a dystopic representation using watercolor. So, you're saying, but I'm just curious if you're saying you just started using watercolor because you were sort of bored with oil paint, but why do you think all of a sudden the collage disappeared?
There's always been a strong sense of humor that I've relied on in the work, up until I think the file cabinet still had it, and it was a media-specific humor, like doing painting portraits of, well, I guess that's funny in itself, painting portraits of file cabinets, but doing it in watercolor, I think it was funny too. I'm not sure why. Again, I think it's a material thing. This is painting fire with water, and that was painting rusty metal with water. So that makes sense. So there's still humor there. I thought maybe I drained all the humor out, but I went another step further with this body of work, draining all of the humor out.
But the irony is kind of still there, using water to paint fire.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's it. Right. Everything's in the material process.
Right. So the medium itself becomes part of the content.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it always wasn't it? Oil painting, so scraps of garbage or old things. Yeah, there's some relationship between the medium and the content, but this is much more direct. And I think one of the first things you experience is thinking about the medium. Also, because I think watercolor is probably less seen in galleries. I think it's something you pay attention to when you see it more.
That's one question I had about how you get your saturated colors with watercolor. Is that a trade secret, or
not a trade secret? Yeah. I just use a lot of it.
So you layer the.
Maybe it's almost acrylic. So much. I also use inks, which are more pigmented, but it's mostly an experiment.
Someone was in here and saying they thought they saw coffee in the one over there.
I think coffee on every painting. I'll say that. Probably these drips.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. So he was right.
I don't know.
You were drooling as you painted. Right?
I think coffee can be worked in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is the Highland Center. Again, the story behind this one is it's a civil rights campus in Tennessee that was recently torched by white supremacists. Rosa Parks had studied here, and MLK.
Excellent. Yeah, it's an important community center in Tennessee. I'm not sure if they discovered the cause, but there were white power symbols found graffitied nearby. They have rebuilt, and I think better than before, bigger and better than before.
Oh, that's
they're pretty powerful legacy civil rights building that was torched at night.
So, and then this one, which is, so all of them have, all of them in the Instagram, we kind of connected to their news stories. So if you want to read more about any of the events, you could find them there. But this one was the final one that we put up. And in that case, we went with the burning bush. So we wanted to go kind of prophetic, biblical. And because this painting sort of, lends itself to that. It's each one of them to distinguish from a single fire, because they all have a similar tone and palette. So like Prometheus, or like we were saying, the Olympic torch, it's all one fire that keeps getting passed around politically, maybe. But each of the paintings, then there are things to grasp very specifically that locate them in a place. So it distinguishes this fire from all the fires. And this one's called Guardrail, right? So the guardrail is so beautifully and carefully painted. I guess partially why you gave it that name, but why did you call it guardrail? Maybe that's the question.
I think that's it. The detail that distinguishes it from other images. And it was also the hardest part to paint. Really.
You didn't want anybody to miss it.
Yeah, really pay attention to this because I had to do this more than once.
Well, a lot of people come in and are very impressed by the guardrail, I can tell you, so you should be happy.
You know, architecture is hard to paint for me, but I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be so precise with architecture. Fire, you can just let her rip.
Yeah, that's
pretty good.
Yeah, fire lends itself technically to watercolor then, doesn't it? Because it's oddly liquid.
It's very organic. It moves very organically. Like watercolor is very unpredictable. So are the smoke and fire patterns are very, they're pretty similar elements in a way. I mean, I try to control it a little bit because I like a certain composition, but sometimes things happen on their own. The billowing is especially good in watercolor, I think.
Well, so we like, I mean, how the fire, the bush itself, like the burning bush, which there are really funny things about this one on Wikipedia that I put on the Instagram about burning bush. Is actually there's it's an Orthodox Christian icon called the burning bush, and that's meant to represent the Virgin Mary, because she was inseminated by, well, the Immaculate Conception. So her bush was never consumed. All right.
I love that you knew exactly what paintings were going in this show and knew what order they were going in. It's amazing to me. And this painting feels especially like a decision you made and brought to the show and gave a lot of meaning to with your interpretations, and which are totally there and somewhat in the title as well.
Right. That biblical.
Yeah, a little bit of biblical.
Well, and the apocalyptic. Yeah. So that I wanted to start here in the main room, even though this isn't how you would enter the space. You come through the front door. And there is a kind of narrative to the installation. The gallery itself always lends itself to a kind of narrative. You come in and through a compressed space into a bigger space. So this is the more present part. So all the paintings in here are from the last 2 years, pretty much, the events, and they're still hot, because they're more recent. And then so we're going backwards out the front door. And then when in the middle section here, we have this painting that's, the ones in the entrance you'll see are cooler, and the fire's already basically consumed the landscape. Whereas here, we're sort of in a transition tonally, and then also there's no fire in this one, it's just smoke. So, but I just asked you because I never knew, because I don't know the news story for this one, other than the fact that it's LA, so it probably has to do with the LA fires. But you don't see fire here, you just see smoke, and the title's called City Smoke. Right? And it's a fabulous painting, beautiful.
Thank you, Jane. Actually, this one, I don't know if it's connected to a fire. It's it could just be smog.
Oh, okay.
It could be like the daily fire that we have,
which is smog.
Which is smog in a way, yeah. The present smoke. And I assume it's LA. In my mind, it's LA and smog. I wanted something more ambivalent,
right?
More daily to be represented.
Because and the other thing, I know there's a second one that's similar that doesn't have at the bottom here this kind of architectural part. That's right. Which just formally speaking, the way that it goes from this dark foreground to a middle ground to a hot white, which is the page, which is interesting in all the paintings, because of the nature of watercolor, the white's the very thing that you don't touch, right? So, but it's also the hottest part. So somehow you make the part that's not even painted to be the focus, and also to be the hot center, like the part that, I don't know, that would be most physically just present and disturbing in some way, like if you were to touch it. So this one concludes in this hot spot, this sunspot, I guess. But this is a beautiful one. I've had a nice time in here looking at it.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, reserving the white is one of the challenges of watercolor, and white is always the hottest. And sometimes maybe I'll put a tiny bit of blue in just to contrast it. But generally, yeah, white represents the hottest part of the painting. In this case, the sun.
Okay, so we're backing out. We're backing out, which, you do come in past this, but then you have to go back out. So there's kind of, like we're saying, a cul-de-sac and a kind of narrative here. So now we're back at World War I. And yeah, and these are archival photographs of no man's land during World War I after some battle or firebombing or something.
Yeah, I don't know what the definition of no man's land is, but you're probably right. They're definitely post-battle battlefields, and my discovery. Well, I've been interested in World War I for a while.
The Great War.
The Great War. Another.
They put the
title.
irony in right in there for you. You didn't even have to do that.
For me, yeah, yeah. Paradise Fires and the Great War. Yeah, it's all there. But they are related to the Paradise Fires in that in the aftermath of those fires, there was so much media coverage of those particular fires. I thought when I looked at the aftermath that it looked like World War I post-battlefield imagery, which is basically dirt and water and sticks or one coming out of the dirt, like trees, all the branches burn out or signs. And that seemed to be a constant. And I'm like, well, why not go with perhaps an original Great Fire, maybe one that does have a connecting thread to the rest of these fires through, the causes of, or the motives rather for that war.
Which you're connecting as if the war never ended in some way, that we're still under siege.
Well, I mean, that war, as I understand it, is related to colonialism and yes, dividing up the spoils of the colonies and fighting over who gets the most, and involving a lot of technology and kind of total disregard for what's best for the civilian population or for casualty counts or for the environment. It's a total destruction of the environment as well. So I think in that way, there's a relationship. Yeah, for sure. I don't think we've ever reflected on that war, probably any other war since, or maybe even on the spectacles of these fires. I don't think there's a lot of deep reflection on what's happened.
That's true. World War II gets the most attention, I guess, doesn't it?
U.S. looks a lot better.
Right. Okay, without explaining it. And you'll see here the catalog number painted in the corner, which is from the archival photo, I assume, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. World War I doesn't have a lot of photo documentation without people in it. And I'm more interested in the landscape because I'm a landscape painter now. So I might have had to pull people out. But yeah, these are just, I'm not sure what that number means, but yeah, it must be part of an archive and just taken for information's sake, not a media image would be my guess, but I don't really know. But I like the number, so I wanted to paint it on to my version of the image as well.
So then that's how we come in then. So on the left here, you see the World War I, no man's land, the Great War. And then you come in and you see city smoke, which is like the middle tone. And then you see the hot paintings in the main space. And you see Chase. And then you go back out again. And this is the real surprise for the, is that in here, we're calling this the project space. Behind the sliding door, there's yet another painting. And the project space, which has this small oil painting by Leslie Brack from 2011, I think, right?
It's an old one.
It's an old painting that we've shown before, and is an example of the oil painting like I was talking about, where this is a Frederick Church copy,
straight up.
same size, Is that right? It was a small study
Pretty close, yeah.
of icebergs, which inevitably now, when seen, you have to think about like dwindling icebergs, which I imagine, and it's a small painting, so it's all in there. Which is probably, I mean, he wasn't thinking of it like that when he painted it.
I think he was making studies, as far as I know, he was making studies. He was on a boat making studies for a grand painting, a more Frederick Church-like painting, which talks about the majesty of the icebergs. Yeah, I don't know. I think later in life he made some more austere versions that maybe he did have some sense, or maybe that's more reflective of his life. But I was so grateful that you remembered that painting, because it is perfect with these other works.
Fire, water, and ice.
And some kind of environmental, yeah,
right.
A connection in 19th century landscape painting directly, and a connection to actual symbols of environmental change that in the currency we usually use, is melting distant areas. It's perfect. And in the bathroom, again, thanks. Was that Sharon as well, calling it the project space?
I think so.
But putting in the bathroom was genius. So I love it.
Yeah, in the bathroom, I liked it because there's all this other stuff around, you know. So it's not a kind of refined space, and then it connects to the toilet and out to the ocean. And I mean,
it's all there.
And there's even, you know, in the modern era, there's so much excess just in this one room, anyway, and so much production. So the dwindling icebergs seem like, you know, this is a good place for them. And again, to reassert my I don't know, my insight, I guess, with this exhibition and the shift to watercolor painting with these oil paintings, so this central band here, which is what Frederick Church would have painted. Leslie added these white bands to the top, which are more thickly painted, say, than the actual image. And again, that's that weird thing that you were doing at the time, where you wouldn't let the Frederick Church appropriated image take up the whole picture plane like it does with the watercolors, but with the oil paintings still being connected somehow to collage and trompe l'oeil. I'm still trying to get my head around that shift, and that's where I think that the watercolor as that second element that you can rub up against the appropriated image to get your irony, to get your sardonic wit or whatever into the painting in the way that you're using the medium in watercolor. That to me is like a very profound move in your work.
Yeah. That's
You're
great.
welcome.
I love your thoughts. I love hearing them. Yeah, mostly I wanted to reference the exact dimensions of Church's painting. But I mostly just wanted to learn from the painting and kind of a classic painting tradition is copied from the masters. But the framing I've always been interested in, like calling attention to the fact that I wasn't the one on the boat making this sketch.
Right.
He probably did it in 20 minutes, took me a little longer. So I think it references all of those things,
right?
The framing, and was my interest there. And yeah,
it kind of it gives it a kind of slight metatextual quality.
Yeah,
right.
It definitely takes you out of the illusion of it.
Right. That's what it does.
And references original source material. You know, there's original source material probably when you see it like this. I didn't.
As opposed to if it fit the whole screen.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I'm always looking at this, and I always looked at it as like icebergs, but the water is brown like dirt, which is a very.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way he painted it, I guess.
Well, or maybe that's the way it was badly reproduced in the book that I had. I haven't seen this one live, but yeah, it's an amazing tone. There's several that are toned similarly, like way warmer than you would normally think of as icebergs. And the final painting is in the cool. He did cools for the final painting, that kind of classic iceberg turquoise and a range of blues. But some of the studies were quite dirty, or again, could be the terrible JPEGs. But
well, it's used a great effect here.
Thank you.
It was a long time before I realized I was looking at brown. I was just interpreting as, water. So it never.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then at some point I was like, wait, it's like dirt. Yeah.
And it's very translucent, so it does have more of a watercolor feeling to it. Another good connection. Thank you for putting that together.
Well, thanks for visiting the bathroom here, which we have a Jim Hyde poster from the show and Dan Snow and Lucy.
You don't
Lucy
usually use
Bluepard.
the bathroom.
No, we've never used that bathroom for exhibition before. I have to say. I use it, but not for exhibiting. Yeah, that's the first use of the project space. Anyway, there's our production team. Thank you so much, Chase, Mike, for manning the headphones. And I guess, should we sign off?
I think I have
Yeah.
to go further. Than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so we're open for another 2 weeks. So June 27th, Sunday, the weekend before the 4th, is our last weekend. It's also the last weekend for the gallery for the season. So, whenever we're open, which is Thursday through Sunday, 12 till 6. Whenever we're open, I'm actually here in person. So I'm always happy. And that's one of the benefits of coming to Brooklyn. You don't just run in and out, we can walk around and talk about the show. And so I hope you'll come by and we can do our own private walkthrough.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks,
for
Leslie.
everything. Yeah, visit David. So it'll be one of the better art conversations you've ever had.
No doubt.